In terms of the actual writing process, I was lucky with criminal justice in that there's a really natural inbuilt structure, which is a crime is committed or alleged to have been committed, and our hero, the main protagonist, is arrested. And then, blow by blow, we watch him go through the whole of the criminal justice process. So there are kind of natural stepping off points, natural places that he's going to be in terms of the structure. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a verdict, and that's going to go one way or the other. And we all know at the back of our minds, if we're watching 5 hours of television drama, that that's going to be the end point, and we're all thinking about that. So there's a natural beginning and a natural end, and all these stepping stones in between. So great to have that. And then within that, in terms of the writing process, there are all these very basic stories within stories. So an example of that would be when Ben goes into the witness box. That's a whole story in itself. Him being taken through his evidence in chief by his own barrister, him being cross-examined afterwards, the story of that cross-examination, how that connects to the plot and what's happened in episode 1. And I think that's satisfying for an audience because they've seen something first, and then they're seeing it reinterpreted in court. They're seeing it put through a different prism by somebody else. So when you're writing, you think, right, I'm going to do Ben in the witness box now. And in a way, having written episode 1 and keeping one's eye all of the time on all of the plot points in what's happening in relation to the alleged crime, knowing that all of those things are going to come up in court, it's sort of, it's a great pleasure actually to be able to kind of, write that. So they're connected. The two things are absolutely connected.
Criminal justice from the start was always intended to be in 1 week. And I think it was fantastic. I mean, whether we can always go on doing this, because that does hoover up, 5 weeks of drama in, and it has to be, shown in 1 week. But audiences really responded to it. It makes the show have a lot of what we call talkaboutability, which is a slightly comedic way of saying it just gets onto into a lot of newspaper agendas. People talk about it. There's an urgency about it. People really, do rush home. It's what we call appointment to view. It makes the show. Well, we've only done it twice, but I think it really does work, and I think we will look to do more of it. And I think one of the things that's helped criminal justice was the iPlayer. I think the fact that people could pick it up and perhaps finish it off at the weekend, it had great iPlayer viewing figures, means that we will definitely look at doing it again in the future. We were nervous about criminal justice because it went against Wimbledon. I mean, I know that's a rather middle-class concern, but actually the truth was it went against a big Andy Murray match in the first episode, and we were all rather thrilled that actually the new incoming channel controller of BBC One, Jay Hunt, moved the Andy Murray match onto BBC One, knocking criminal justice a bit late, but giving us tremendous, amount of people already sitting in front of their televisions who then gave criminal justice a go and stayed with it. So that was very exciting, and I think it does give it an enormous urgency, an enormous sense of event.
And I think 95% of this audience were television watchers Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday night. It's a huge ask, I think. And we were very lucky. 5 million people watched it, and 5 million people stayed watching it for 5 nights. So we were lucky, but it was a big, bold risk.
The frisson of criminal justice would not be nearly so exciting if we were faking it. The whole point is that it was a well-researched drama written by an ex-barrister who knew what he was talking about. So people felt there was authenticity, they felt the lid was being lifted off a real situation, and they were getting to see it. Now, that doesn't mean, as in any drama, that we're just playing something out in a very sort of straightforward way. Drama needs compression, it needs selection, it needs a twist, it needs things to make it actually feel like a drama as opposed to a sort of verbatim documentary. So of course there's dramatic license in there, definitely, but it is a well-researched drama based on truth. And if it makes controversial points, it's because there are controversial points to be made. You know, they're a story in controversial events. Now, the BBC has an editorial policy unit. These kind of shows are picked over very, very carefully. If the editorial policy unit feel we've gone beyond the bounds, they will make it very clear that we need to look at something again. So we don't do these things willy-nilly. We don't do them in a vacuum, and we're not cavalier about it. That is absolutely not the case. But you know, our mission is to tell, you know, good and bold stories.
The chairman of the Bar Council wrote a letter to The Guardian saying, and I'm going to paraphrase here, so excuse me if it's a little bit wrong, but something like, this drama in no way represents the way that barristers work, and paraphrasing a lot actually, something like you know, the profession upholds the best possible standards of practice all of the time. Short letter in The Guardian. And on the whole, I don't sort of like to engage in public kind of, you know, argument over, but this felt very important. It felt very important to conduct a kind of argument in public about this, because I just thought that's really wrong. That's really not right. That, like any profession, there are great people working in it who are really good and are very, very principled. And there are some really useless barristers. And there are some really badly behaved barristers. And it's just not fair to say, as a profession, 5,000 of us are all marvellous and all behaving very well, because it just ain't true. So I felt a bit cross, actually, and I wrote a letter back to The Guardian just saying that this isn't right and here's why. It's very interesting from a kind of how the media works point of view, because a letter from the chairman of the Bar Council in The Guardian one day, and my response the next day, which is a slightly longer letter, becomes a news story. And that on that second day is on the front page of The Guardian, which is interesting to me in terms of how news is made. Very cheap, of course. No reporter has to go out and spend any time finding anything, because all of the information is contained in the two letters plus maybe a phone call. That's it. I had a lot of letters, funnily enough, from serving prisoners and former prisoners who say, this is exactly how I remember it. I felt bullied, pressured, dominated by the bloke in the wig who was representing me, who, before my trial, either I'd never met, which is sometimes the way that a barrister will be briefed the night before a trial, not have spent any time before the start of the trial with the defendant, which, from a defendant's point of view, given that this is potentially the kind of single most important few days of their life and will determine all of their future, can't be right.